Joining me now is the best-selling author of The Madness of Crowds, The Strange Death of Europe, and his latest work, The War on the West, Douglas Murray. Douglas, let's start with the Biden family's woes. We have a clearly cognitively impaired president in the White House, and his son this week made his first appearance in a Delaware federal court where he pled not guilty to tax and gun charges after the judge rejected his rather lenient plea deal. Now, Douglas, what's particularly interesting here is Hunter Biden admitted to the judge that he received over $600,000 US from a Chinese Communist Party-backed company. Now, this completely contradicts President Biden's insistence that nobody from his family made a cent from China. Douglas, this doesn't look good for the president at a time when his approval rating is already sub 40%.
Yes, I've said to you before, Rita, that I think that there is so much more to come on this. And it is going to be the tool that the Democrat Party will use to make sure that Joe Biden isn't actually their candidate at the next election. I put it out there again now. The Biden family corruption story is just deadly for Joe Biden and, as a result, for the party should they be running him at the next election. And this whole story has been simmering away. You've been on top of it. The New York Post has been on top of it. A lot of media haven't been on top of it. And it's come as a surprise to them this week. But it shouldn't have been a surprise. The sweetheart plea deal that Hunter Biden and his father had negotiated, and it's clear that it was a family negotiation, was meant to see him plead on these sort of relatively minor charges, get a slap on the wrist, and then sort of get on with things. But the judge in Delaware turned out sort of hadn't been spoken to, as it were. She made sure that she actually read the detail of it and wasn't happy with it. Wasn't happy, among other things, that Hunter Biden was going to get effectively sort of exonerated for things yet to be discovered. And so since the plea deal fell apart in the court in front of her, Hunter Biden ended up having to plead and pleaded not guilty. So this is about to all start. It's about to kick off, Rita.
And more damning information about Hunter this week. This crackhead whore enthusiast with no discernible skills who was somehow earning millions as an energy executive when his dad was vice president. And then around the age of 50, he decides to become an artist and sells his little doodles for hundreds of thousands. Well, this week, the identity of a substantial supporter of Hunter Biden's art career was revealed. And guess what? It's a top Democratic donor, Elizabeth Hirsch Naftali, who has been appointed to a prestigious commission by Joe Biden. Nothing dodgy there at all. But Douglas, it's not just Joe Biden that is suffering a cognitive decline, but from the Republicans, we have Senate Leader Mitch McConnell, who clearly has some issues as well. Watch this.
Okay, Mitch. Anything else you want to say, or should we just go back to your office?
And then there's a 90-year-old Democrat, Dianne Feinstein, who this week repeatedly was told by an aide to just say A during a key defence vote. Term limits seem like a very good idea indeed, Douglas.
I mean, term limits or just like anything to get America out of this gerontocracy that you and I can see, and everyone, the whole world can see. It's both parties, Rita. I mean, one of the things that Donald Trump did in 2016 that was so remarkable was that he did, whatever you think about him, he smashed this idea that, you know, there are just a few families basically who have to be rotated, have the presidency rotated around among them, and a bunch of 80 and 90-year-olds who sort of sort everything out in the Senate and the House. And Trump blew that apart. But since that, It's just been back to this old business of doing things. And it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing for anyone in Australia or Britain or anywhere else in the world who, whatever problems that we have in our own political systems, we don't have this one. We don't have this one of people who just freeze and cognitively not there, it seems. We don't have that problem. If this happened in Australia, Rita, I think, if it happened once, there would be questions and that person would probably be out. But I mean, just to put it in context, I'm a great admirer of John Howard, who's, of course, made the news a bit this week. But if people in Australia said, let's run John Howard for the next election, I mean, I'd be for it in some ways because he's a remarkable man. But I think a lot of people say, oh, are you sure he's not, possibly of retirement age now? And that would be a good argument. It wouldn't fly in America. In America, people would say, what are you talking about, past it? In your late 80s, you're just starting. In your 90s, you're a spring chicken still. In American politics, that is the case. And I'm afraid that both parties have to look to themselves on this. Where is the talent? Where's the young people coming up? What has happened to mean that both parties are in this situation?
Well, Douglas, the quality of the politicians in the UK, well, it's not much better, you've got to say. You've written about the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, and his radical agenda. Tell me why you say he's a menace.
Well, the problem with Sadiq Khan is that he's one of these extra layer politicians. London has a mayor. I actually voted against London having a mayor when it came up for a vote a quarter of a century ago, because I don't like layers upon layers of politicians. The reason being, I like people to be able to be held accountable. So if there's a policing problem, I want us to be able to take it out and vote out the person who has just made that happen. Problem with things like London mayor is you can always say, oh, it's not me, it's the assembly. Well, it's not the assembly, it's the MPs. It's not the MPs, it's the government. There's too many layers. Sadiq Khan actually does have some control over policing, significant control over policing. And under his watch, things like knife crime in London have gone through the roof. But while saying he can't actually control that, it's all because the government, the Tories, the Conservatives, as always, whilst he's doing that and claiming he can't control that, he is running a massive advertising campaign trying to tell men in London what to say. Specifically, he says that we should say mate or mate dragged out at a fellow man doing anything inappropriate with a woman.
Mate.
Mate. Mate.
Mate.
I despair, Rita. In a city where knife crime is going on and you can't deal with that, you want to tell blokes what to say to their mates? I mean, it's this old situation we get back to where everything is policed except crime. Police our language, police our bank accounts, crime, that seems to be beyond our ability to deal with. That's what I mind. And I think that is a menace.
Well, the crime in London is one issue, but also this determination to rid the joint of cars. They've got this tax on people driving into, and they want to extend the area where that tax applies. Yeah. Why are Londoners copying this? Why is this man getting re-elected?
Well, he probably will get re-elected, partly because the Conservatives haven't been able to find a prominent enough candidate. They've got quite a good candidate, but she's got no name recognition. You're right. This war on motorists is part of it. It's starting in London, but it's going out elsewhere in the country. Labour Party politicians have boasted that these extra taxes on motorists are going to happen. But here's another thing, Rita. You see, there's been endless train strikes in London. If you arrived in London in the last year, chances were you might get your bags at Heathrow, walk out onto the platform and discover there was no way into central London that didn't involve you acting as a cash dispenser to Uber or black cab drivers. And you see, so they can't get the trains running. There are endless strikes with trains. And at the same time, you have a war on motorists. It's like, what gives? how do you expect people to get around? It's just these basic levels of incompetence that I mind. And the problem is I mind the incompetence even more when it comes with the sidecar of grandiosity of, we will deal with hate. You know, you can't deal with a knife crime, but you'll tackle hate. You'll tackle a massive human emotion. You know, you can't deal with just getting trains running or not, you know, penalizing motorists, but you will police the language. That's the deadly combination. It's the one that I wish voters in Britain, like elsewhere, would chuck out.
Oh, you think of Sadiq Khan, you think of that wonderful term that you coined, performative caring. I think you used it for Jacinda Ardern, but I think you could just as well apply it to Sadiq Khan. He excels in that area. And lastly, I want to ask you about Disney. They seem to be hell-bent on destroying another classic, Snow White this time. Let's hear from the actress playing the iconic character.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere.
Douglas, can't they just leave the classics alone? And I don't know, maybe write some new stories with those sort of themes, modern themes, but leave Snow White, leave Cinderella, leave these classics alone.
Absolutely. God, isn't it just so banal? You know, all the classic stories of fairy tales, we know them all. But we also now know this sort of awful, boring modern take on everything. Every woman has to be, you know, the leader she knows she can be. You know, well, I'm not sure that a princess or whatever is the classic sort of what every girl can be. The sort of this idea that every fairy tale actually has to recreate the princess into being a sort of modern leader of the United Nations. Well, okay, that's a different story. If you want to write that story, as you say, do that story, do a new story. Why keep pulling around? We had Peter Pan last time, and the lost boys have got to be lost non-transgender, non-binary individuals of indeterminate sex or whatever. And now we've got to have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs reimagined as a heroic female leader who's made her own way in the world by climbing up the terrible ladder of oppression, accompanied by 7 huge blokes, or maybe transsexuals. I mean, just make up your own stories, and you don't need to do this. And the main reason, as I say, is in the modern era, it is more boringly predictable what we're going to have shoved down our throats than any predictable story tale of old. It's the new stuff that's really old hat at this point.
Well said, Douglas Murray. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.